Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we're tackling a really fascinating question. How can you hit a major policy goal, save money, but actually end up making the system, well, fragile?
Yeah, it's quite the paradox. We're looking at Japan's generic drugs.
Exactly. This huge push for generics. Over 80% usage now, right?
That's right, on a quantity basis.
Yeah.
And it was, absolutely necessary. Japan needed to curb its soaring medical costs, especially with the aging population.
Okay, so 80%. That sounds like a huge success on paper. But the sources we looked at suggest this rapid push created some, well, serious distortions, challenges even.
Distortions and challenges. It seems the speed of adoption just outpaced the structural reforms needed to actually support it, to make it sustainable.
So that's our mission today, really, to unpack what true stability for generic drugs actually requires. It's clearly more than just a percentage target.
We need to dig into the underlying conditions, Why is a system designed for efficiency feeling so fragile?
Right, let's maybe start with the money. Because the Japanese generic market seems to operate financially very differently from what you might see elsewhere.
Oh, completely different. When you think generics, you usually think, what, super low prices?
Rock bottom, yeah. Aggressive competition.
Exactly. In the U.S., for instance, the market forces are strong. Prices can get pushed down to maybe like 1/10 of the original patented drug price. It's pretty cutthroat global competition.
But Japan, the sources say generics started around half the price of the original.
Yeah, 50%, which is, frankly, quite high on a global scale for a starting point.
And that's the paradox, isn't it?
That's the root of it. This higher starting price, it gave Japanese generic companies a really predictable profit margin. It fueled their growth, pretty rapid growth, actually, over the last couple of decades.
Even though the government was cutting prices every year.
Yeah, even with those annual price reductions, it was a sort of comfortable, protected domestic bubble for them.
Okay, but if it was so comfortable and profitable, why the fragility now? Why didn't that translate into a really resilient system?
Well, precisely because it was comfortable. They focused almost entirely on the domestic market. There wasn't much pressure or incentive, really, to expand internationally.
So they didn't build up that global competitiveness needed to survive in tougher markets?
Exactly. They make high-quality products, no doubt, but they aren't necessarily price competitive on a global stage.
I mean, there are exceptions, right? The source mentioned Teikoku Seiyaku with patches and things in the U.S.
Sure, there are some exceptions, but overall, the industry is very Japan-centric.
And that focus then leads to the next big problem, the supply chain itself.
Yes. It led directly to this core fragility point. A huge dependence on importing the active pharmaceutical ingredients, the APIs.
Those are the key ingredients that make the drug work, Chris.
Precisely. And Japanese companies generally don't manufacture these themselves. They import them.
And the way they import.
Yeah.
Because the industry's fragmented, it's small batches, often using trading companies.
You got it. Small, lots of intermediaries. And that structure, well, it means Japanese API prices are thought to be among the highest in the world.
Wow. So the whole system is built on this high-cost imported foundation.
Which makes it incredibly vulnerable. Any global price increase, any supply disruption for those APIs, it hits them hard.
Okay, so they grew the volume of generic use massively, hit the target, but built it on a costly, import-dependent structure that isn't globally competitive. That leads us straight into the next issue, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Trying to fix that high-cost structure, the innovation roadblock.
Right. You look overseas and companies are constantly tweaking their manufacturing, finding efficiencies, cutting costs. It's just standard practice in competitive markets.
But in Japan, trying to make those same kinds of efficiency improvements, it sounds incredibly difficult. Why? Why is it so complex administratively?
It's bureaucracy, the sheer weight of it.
Yeah.
If you want to change a manufacturing process, even for the better, the amount of paperwork, the regulatory hoops you have to jump through in Japan, it's immense.
How immense? The source mentioned something pretty staggering.
Yeah, it said that the hassle is so great, firms might actually avoid making changes, even if those changes could save them hundreds of millions of yen. Think about that.
Just ignoring huge savings to avoid the paperwork burden, that's something.
It points to a broader issue, what the sources call this heavy administrative burden in Japanese society generally. The focus on compliance, while important, seems to have unintentionally slowed down innovation and adaptation over the last, say, 20 years.
And connecting that back to supply stability.
Yeah.
If you're reliant on expensive imported APIs, and you can't easily make your own processes cheaper because of this administrative weight, what do you do when costs go up?
You're stuck. You either just have to eat the price increase from your supplier, pass it on if you can, or maybe you try to switch suppliers quickly.
Which carries its own risks, right? Quality risks.
Absolutely. And redundancy is hard too. The government did ask companies to find multiple suppliers for APIs, multiple manufacturing sites, especially after some earthquake disruptions, multi-sourcing.
Makes sense.
But with the sheer number of different generic products each company handles, trying to build that kind of deep redundancy for every single one, it's practically impossible.
So this structural inability to adapt efficiently, combined with the high costs, it leads to a breaking point.
And we're seeing that now. The estimates are pretty grim. Somewhere between 30 and 40% of generic products are actually loss-making right now. Unprofitable.
30 to 40%? That's unsustainable.
Totally unsustainable. It's hollowing out the industry. The current government approach seems to be encouraging companies to just outsource the production of these unprofitable drugs to other firms.
But they still sell it under their own brand.
Yeah, which doesn't really solve the core problem, does it? It just shifts the inefficiency around.
So what's the proposed real solution? The sources mention something more radical.
The call is for companies to basically withdraw cleanly, to stop making these loss-making products that aren't core to their business and really focus on where they are strong.
Shrink the product list to strengthen the company.
Exactly. The goal is rationalization. Instead of having, say, 10, maybe even more suppliers for one single drug product.
Which apparently happens sometimes.
It does. Instead of that, aim for maybe just 2 or 3 strong, efficient producers for each drug across the whole market.
Okay, I can see the logic. If a company makes fewer products, they can focus more resources, right? Better quality control, managing their API supply chain more carefully.
Precisely. Instead of spreading themselves thin across hundreds of marginally profitable or even loss-making items.
Then concentrating production should lead to economies of scale, lower manufacturing costs overall.
That's the key. Scale benefits are crucial for lowering costs and achieving that stable, affordable supply in the long run.
But, okay, the obvious question then. What about essential medicines?
Yeah.
The ones people absolutely need, but maybe they're inherently difficult or expensive to make, so they end up being loss-making.
That's where the government's pricing system has to come in, the YACA price.
The official reimbursement price.
Right. For those critical, essential drugs that no company can viably produce at current prices, the YACA price simply has to be raised strategically. Just enough to incentivize maybe 2 or 3 companies to keep making it reliably.
So you ensure supply for necessities, even if it means targeted price increases for those specific drugs. Stability costs something.
It does. Profitability, even if small, has to be guaranteed for essential items.
And just consolidating suppliers from, say, 10 down to 2 or 3, that must also help the buyers, right? Hospitals, pharmacies. Less risk of holding too much stock from too many different sources.
Absolutely. It simplifies things for everyone down the chain, reduces inventory risk. It makes the whole flow smoother.
Okay, so rationalization, better pricing for essentials. It sounds logical, but all that efficiency doesn't mean much if people don't trust the drugs themselves.
And that brings us, unfortunately, to the elephant in the room. The crisis around quality assurance, the governance failures, the shockwaves from the Kobayashi Kako manufacturing incident, they were huge.
Yeah, the details that came out were really bad. It wasn't just a mistake.
No, it exposed really deep systemic flaws. Things like incomplete manufacturing processes, items just not being checked properly.
Like missing in ingredients that shouldn't have been there.
Right. And maybe the most damaging part, this use of unofficial back procedure manuals, secret instructions that were totally different from the official procedures they'd filed with the regulator.
That's incredibly serious. A total breakdown of process integrity.
And when you look at why it happened, the analysis points to explosive growth. That company's revenue just skyrocketed from like 1.6 billion yen to nearly 37 billion yen in under 20 years.
Wow. It's massive growth.
Massive. And their hiring, their training, their internal controls, their governance, it just couldn't keep up. The pressure on the manufacturing sites became immense, and it seems like misconduct almost became normalized.
And that wasn't an isolated incident, was it? There were others.
Sadly, yes. Which is what really erodes public trust. And trust is fundamental for stable supply. People need to believe in the medicine they're taking.
The sources also mentioned something about transparency, or the lack of it, a cover-up culture.
Yeah, that perception is damaging. When things go wrong, how the company and the industry responds is critical. The author drew a contrast with, I think it was an Indian company they'd worked with previously.
What did they do differently?
They apparently had very clear, dedicated whistleblowing channels, phone, email. And if a report came in, an investigative committee was launched immediately. That kind of visible, proactive approach to finding and fixing problems, that's how you build or rebuild trust.
So the lesson is transparency isn't optional. It's core to stability.
Yeah,
Trust requires systemic effort and visible accountability.
exactly. Which leads us to the final, really crucial point here. We need to think about this whole issue on a different level. Stable domestic drug supply. It's not just a healthcare policy matter.
It's more fundamental.
It's fundamentally a matter of national defense, national security.
How so?
Well, think back to the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic. India, a major global supplier of generics, temporarily halted exports.
I remember that. Caused a lot of concern.
Huge concern. Imagine a major national emergency, a conflict, a natural disaster. If you are overwhelmingly reliant on imports for essential medicines, your ability to care for your population is immediately jeopardized.
You're vulnerable to decisions made elsewhere.
Precisely. And add to that the current global climate.
Yeah.
Geopolitical tensions, potential trade wars, U.S.-China friction, just general uncertainty about shipping and logistics.
Relying too heavily on complex, long-distance supply chains for life-saving drugs starts to look pretty risky. Strategically risky.
Extremely risky. So the conclusion from the sources is quite clear. For certain core essential medicines, Japan simply must maintain continuous domestic manufacturing capacity.
Even if it costs a bit more than importing sometimes.
Even then, it's a strategic necessity, a non-negotiable for national resilience.
Okay, so pulling all these threads together, achieving stable generic supply in Japan isn't just about hitting that 80% usage number or just cutting costs.
Far from it. It demands deep structural reform, rationalizing the number of products and producers. It needs robust quality assurance systems that people actually trust. And fundamentally, it requires a healthy, financially viable domestic industry.
An industry capable of operating efficiently and reliably.
Yes.
So where does that leave things? What's the big takeaway for policymakers, for the industry, for all of us?
I think the core challenge, the question left hanging, is about balance. If we accept that stable domestic supply is vital, almost a national security issue, then how exactly should that drug pricing mechanism, the YACA price, be managed?
How do you set it?
How do you set it to achieve two potentially conflicting goals? You want global price competitiveness because that saves healthcare costs, but you also need to maintain these essential, sometimes more costly, domestic manufacturing capabilities for resilience.
Finding that sustainable balance between cost efficiency and security. That's the tightrope they need to walk.
That's the fundamental tension, and resolving that is really the next critical step for Japan's healthcare future.
A really complex challenge with huge implications. Thank you for walking us through this deep dive.
My pleasure. Lots to think about.